Welcome to another edition of the Sundown series, and as you can see, we have entered a brand new state. We didn't stay in California very long. I didn't expect us to stay there very long anyway. But now we are in the state of Illinois. Now I'm going to give you a warning. Illinois has probably the most sundown towns and or counties that I have come across when I was gathering this list together. Illinois, from what I gathered, has about a total of 14 or 15 sundown towns that are either still active as sundown towns or no longer active as a sundown town, or was once one at one time. And we're going to cover all of them. So if I'm doing this series weekly, we going to be here for the next few months. I didn't think I was going to find anything really to talk about with this particular town, which is called Anna, Illinois. But I went on to Google, I typed in Anna, Illinois as a sundown town, and I came across this article that was written on November 7th, 2019. And it took me about almost a good minute to scroll through the whole thing just to see what I was getting ready to read. And it's a lengthy article, and I'm going to read the entire thing because it just sounds very interesting. Now, usually my Sundown series videos aren't very long, but this one might be over 10 minutes, probably damn near 20 minutes, almost like the one I did when I was talking about Vidor, Texas, which of course was the inspiration for me doing this series. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. So, the name of the article is called The Legend of ANNA, Revisiting an American Town Where Black People Weren't Welcome After Dark. It says, I got into town just after sunset. The lights were on at a place called the Brick House Grill, and if you were out on South Main Street on Friday night in February, chances are that's where you were going, so I went in too. I took a seat at the bar. A man 2 stools down from me struck up a conversation. I told him I was a journalist from Chicago and asked him to tell me about this town. You know how this town is called Anna? He started. That's for ain't no niggers allowed. That's why they call it Anna, A-N-N-A. Now, the place is really called Anna, Illinois, but they framed it as that and gave it they renamed it for that purpose. He laughed, shook his head, and took a sip of his beer. The man was white. I am white. Everyone else in that restaurant in Anna was white. Later that night, I realized what shook me most about our conversation. He didn't pause before he said what he said. He didn't look around the room to see whether anyone else could hear us. He didn't lower his voice. He just said it. I first learned about Anna in a book called Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of American Racism, about the thousands of communities across the country that for much of the 20th century kept themselves white. The term sundown town applies to places that via policy, violence, or both barred black people from town after dark. As the book explains, the phrase is derived from the signs that many of these places formerly sported at their corporate limits, signs that usually said, nigger, don't let the sun go down on you in blank. I picked up the book in part because its author, James W. Lowen, a sociologist who taught at the University of Vermont and at Tougaloo College in Mississippi, is from Decatur, Illinois. Much of his research on sundown towns led him back to his home state, where I now live and which I wanted to better understand. When Lowen began his research in 1999, he thought he'd found just a handful of sundown towns and recovering, quote-unquote, sundown towns as he calls them, in Illinois. Instead, he found hundreds, from neighborhoods on Chicago's North Shore to suburbs in the center of the state to small towns in southern Illinois such as Anna. But the stories of how these communities became or stayed mostly white are often unknown, ignored, or not fully told. Lowen said sundown towns sprang up all around the country from 1890 to 1940, a period he calls the nadir of race relations in America. For the small independent towns all around that state that are still all white or almost all white, it's like the civil rights movement never happened. Anna's historical resistance to black people is and has long been well known in the region, even though it may have never been codified. I found references to the fact that black people weren't allowed to live in Anna in newspaper articles from as early as 1903. In that particular reference, a woman from Anna who worked as a hotel maid in Indianapolis was quoted as saying, "I never saw more than 10 Negroes in all my life until I was 18, as a Negro is not allowed to stop in our little village of Anna." Over the past 2 years, I visited the town several times to try to understand where Anna's history had left the town today. I talked with people going on about their lives. In the library, the Farm Fresh Milk Store, the Blue Boar Restaurant, the City's Park, the Walmart parking lot, and other pockets of Anna. I talked with public officials, historians, and longtime residents. I visited a grave in Anna Cemetery that belongs to the man deemed by a local newspaper in 1916 to be the only colored man who has ever lived in this city. And I spent some time with some of the few black families, if not the only one, living in Anna today. Now, mind you, like I said, this article was written on November 7th, 2019, as in just a few months ago. This is very, very recent. This is not 10 years ago. This is less than a year ago. Still, I'm not going to claim I know Anna's full story. I'm an outsider. But after hearing ANNA said aloud that night, I realized my race made me a sort of an insider too. Would the man who first recited ANNA have done so if I weren't white? Nearly everyone I met knew what Anna stood for, whether they heard it first as a joke at school or from their parents or just living here long enough. Most people said they wished the ANNA reputation would just go away and were quick to say Anna wasn't like that anymore. Like what? I'd ask. If Anna has changed, how? Anna is a city of little more than 4,000 people. Well, remember what I've said about them very small towns. As mentioned when I was talking about Arkansas in the first few weeks of this series beginning. When they're really small like that, and it's just little pockets of people, that already lets you know what you're dealing with. Located in the middle of Union County, where soybean fields and flatlands to the north give way to the forest and sandstone canyons of southern Illinois. Here, Illinois is no longer the prairie state, a correspondent for New York's Evening Post wrote in 1858. While covering the third Lincoln-Douglas debate, which was held in Jonesboro, a small town that shares a border with Anna. In fact, many of Anna's earliest residents were from Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. Why doesn't those three locations surprise me? In the years leading up to the Civil War, family lines in the South still existed with these people of the new Midwest, wrote the late Anna resident George E. Parks in 1983 in Histories of Union County, and some residents remain sympathetic to their southern home states. Even today, southern Illinois has more in common culturally with Kentucky and Missouri than with its other neighbors. For years, Confederate battle flags were draped on the storefront of Anna's main street without much objection. For much of the 20th century, Anna was almost entirely white, except for a handful of black residents at different times. Around 1980, Anna's black population grew to about a few dozen residents. Today, Anna is one of the whitest municipalities in southern Illinois. According to the 2010 census, 95.7% of its citizens are white, and its black population hasn't changed much since the modest uptick nearly 40 years ago. Some residents of Anna describe their town as safe, family-centric, and quaint, and contrast these features with the problems they perceive in bigger, less white neighborhoods such as Carbondale, a city about 20 miles north of Anna that is home to Southern Illinois University, and Cairo, about 35 miles south of Anna, located at the state's southernmost tip. Cairo has long been emblematic of a future that Anna fears, the decline of a once thriving town. Cairo's population, roughly 2,500, is now about half of what it was in 1990, though people began leaving earlier. Some of the white people who left Cairo blame changes in the city, its population loss, the flight of business, episodes of violence during the civil rights era on black people. Now, how about that? And when they say the flight of businesses, that's basically white flight. Now listen to that. They actually blame. Now this is a whole nother town here. This isn't Anna, Illinois. They're saying they blamed the conditions they went through on black people. And you know what? I'm almost certain that that's how many of them felt, or their attitude was back in the day. Some people still do. Like many other small towns, Anna has lost industry. the makers of Bunny Bread, that's what I said, Bunny Bread, as an old jingle went in Florsheim Shoes. Both closed factories in the early 1990s, but the city is still commercially alive. A Walmart and fast food chains now cluster in Anna's East End near U.S. Highway 51. Independent businesses run up and down Main Street. The Union County Museum sits about 5 miles north of Anna in Cobden, a community known for its apple and peach orchards. Patrick Brumlev, who oversees the museum as the president of the Union County Historical and Genealogical Society, said Anna was named after Anna Davy, the wife of a man who founded the town in 1854. But he said he gets asked every so often about ANNA by outsiders like me. As he told me about Anna's origins, he pointed me to a book of letters published by the Jonesboro Gazette, written by the newspaper editor James Evans, who left his job in 1862 to join the 109th Illinois Volunteer Infantry Regiment for the Union Army, but who, along with 7 other officers from the 109th, was discharged from the Union Army for disloyalty. Though Brumlev said many residents supported the preservation of the Union, Evans' support was contingent of the continuation of slavery, and his letters show his increasing contempt for the war as the Lincoln administration took steps toward emancipation. He calls black people animals. He complains that black soldiers are treated better than white soldiers. He warns that free black men will take jobs away from white men. When he returned home and resumed his role as editor, he wrote that he and the other officers were perfectly satisfied for the fact that fighting to free the N-word is no wise or desirable task. Stories of intimidation and violence against black people and against white people who tried to employ them in Anna continued for decades after the war. While the details of each incident are often vague or contradictory, newspaper accounts, oral history archives, and other documents chronicle a narrative of Anna's emergency reputation as ANNA. In 1865, a black man walking toward Anna along railroad tracks outside town was shot and killed in what the Chicago Tribune said was supposed to have been done by some Copperhead wretch. Copperhead being slang for Northerners sympathetic to the Confederacy, as the disposition of the tribe here is to kill or drive off all N-words. And in 1874, during Reconstruction, white residents in Anna were met with the demands from what the Cairo Bulletin called the Ku Klux demonstrations that they fire any black people employed in the area and send the Negroes out of the county or suffer the consequences. By the turn of the century, Anna, at least according to the Jonesboro Gazette, was grateful it wasn't wrapped up in what the newspaper deemed a race problem in places where the Negro forms a considerable population. In Cairo, for example, about 40% of residents were black, and many of them were formerly enslaved people who fought new lives in supposedly free states, such as Illinois. How fortunate we are to have little of darkest Africa among us, the Gazette wrote in January 1903, adding that it would be presumptuous to place the Negro in the places where only white men should fill as long as this is a white man's country. Then, in a moment that would lodge itself in regional memory, a 23-year-old white woman from Anna was found dead in November 1909 in an alley in Cairo. Coincidentally, her name was Anna Pelly. Bloodhounds, after picking up the scent of a piece of cloth used to gag her, led Cairo police to arrest a black man named William James, an employee of the Cairo Ice and Coal Company, according to the Cairo Bulletin. Less than 72 hours later, without a trial, and after the county sheriff unsuccessfully tried to spirit James out of town to safety, residents took the law into their own hands. They led James to a pair of steel arches that spanned the intersection of the center of Cairo's commercial district, which was crowded with thousands of onlookers, most of whom came as word spread about James' arrest. Now, before I go any further, look at how they flocked to just see the murder of one black man who probably was innocent of a crime. Look at how they flocked to that. Like that's where the whole pickaninny thing came from. They would flock there and watch the black man be lynched, take pictures of it, make it a postcard, and send it off as gifts to family members during whatever holiday they were celebrating at the time, most likely Thanksgiving and Christmas. With a rope around his neck, the bulletin reported James confessed. The mob pulled him up to hang him, but the rope broke, so they shot him repeatedly instead. They then dragged his body through the streets, set it on fire, and later cut off his head and stuck it on a hitching post. Rule Heinemann, who lived in Anna, was 7 at the time. As I remember, in order to prove the Anna people that he had been lynched, I think they brought one of his legs back to Anna, Hyman recalled in the 1970s as a part of oral history project at Southern Illinois Shawnee Community College. Hyman died in 1998. The night after James was killed, a band of men from Anna headed for a nearby quarry, which employed a number of black men. About 10 workers fled to the woods. We're much obliged to the managers of the quarry if they will confine their force to whites in the future, the Jonesboro Gazette wrote in language and thinking typical of the paper at the time. Hyman, in his interview, said any black people who worked or lived in Anna were driven out of town after the Anna Pelly incident in 1909. There was one exception, the Sales family. John and Emily Sales had lived together in Anna for 50 years in a small home on an alley. He worked odd jobs according to the 1910 census, and she was a washerwoman cleaning clothes. They were formerly enslaved, had fled Tennessee as the Civil War ended, and eventually settled in Anna in 1867, according to Emily's obituary in the Jonesboro Gazette. John Sales was in his mid-90s when he died in August 1916. The Gazette wrote that the only colored man who has ever lived in the city died at his home in Sunday night. Emily Sales died in Anna in 1932. Their niece Nora, who lived in the same house, died about 30 years later. Today, Emily and John share a small tombstone in the Anna Cemetery. About 100 steps away is the grave of Anna Pelly, marked by a sculpture of a woman on her knees crying with the inscription, "A life sacrificed but remembered by friends." Michael Hunter leaned forward in his camouflage printed office chair. When I met him last year, Hunter was the chief of Anna's police department, and I was curious whether the ANNA reputation affected how local officials did their jobs. I was born here and lived in the South for many years, so I don't see skin color, said Hunter, who retired in May after nearly 2 decades on the force. Hunter told me that when he'd pull over black motorists, they would sometimes tell him during traffic stops that they knew what Anna stood for and why he'd stopped them. He didn't like it when people assumed he was racist. I worked nights for 13 years. I can't tell what color anybody is at night. So that always bothered me that was their perception. Racism is not a problem in Anna, he said, at least no more than it is the rest of the country. Anna's mayor, Steve Hartline, agreed. It's a shame that wording is even out there when it comes to Anna, Hartline said. It's really sad. I'm just sorry we have to talk about that, he added. That is not the Anna I know. You want to know what's so crazy? Every time I come across a post where a palm color person in particular will say racism doesn't exist, or it's in the past, or it's not here anymore, I don't see it, or I don't see color, a whole bunch of racist or racial issues tend to follow right behind it. And usually not too far from where the person is that said it. Hartline grew up in Cobden, the town just north of Anna. He's been Anna's mayor for nearly 20 years, and he served in the police department for 15 years before that. He said he can't think of a single incident in Anna that had race at its center that had taken place in his years of public service. But these incidents happened. In March 2013, 4 young white men attacked a black 16-year-old in a parking lot behind a furniture store on Main Street. According to the police reports, one of the suspects allegedly tried to sodomize the victim with either a tire iron or an axe handle. Although one of the young men told police they attacked the victim because he was black, the police did not charge the 4 men with a hate crime. Now, that's 2013. You're talking 7 years ago. That's very recent. And who was this? That official claimed that that he didn't see no racism. See what I mean? Lines right up with what I said. In 2007, and look at what they tried to do. They tried to sodomize him. I swear, that's why the pedophile scope, parameter, whatever you want to call it, fits them to a T. And when you look up in the FBI crime stats under rape, they lead in that all the time. In 2017, in the aftermath of the white supremacists Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, white Anna resident named Tabitha Tripp said at a Union County board meeting that she was concerned about hate incidents in the county and asked the county commissioners to consider a resolution identical to one that had recently passed the Illinois House condemning hate groups. The proposal was never brought up for a vote, in part because commissioners said they didn't believe it was their job to address such concerns. The more you talk about it, it just creates more of an issue, Max Miller, Union County Board Chairman, told me. I just didn't think it was worth talking about. And that's another thing that they like to do. They like to brush things under the rug and say that if they don't talk about it, it'll just go away. They love throwing band-aids over flesh wounds. Some sundown towns in the Midwest have begun to confront their legacies. In March 2015, the City Council of Goshen, Indiana, voted 6-0 to pass a resolution acknowledging the racially exclusionary past of Goshen, Indiana as a sundown town. In late 2016, the mayor of La Crosse, Wisconsin, formally apologized for the city's history of racial exclusion and signed a proclamation to work toward racial equality. We've got issues and are not shirking away from those issues, Mayor Tim Kabat, who is white, told the La Crosse Tribune. We recognize this is a problem and need to do something about it. The Union County Board of Commissioners is all white. So is the Anna City Council, the Anna Police Department, and every teacher at Anna Jonesboro High School, the public high school serving Anna. I wish we had more diversity of our staff, said Brett Dettering, the school's principal. They all say that, and they usually all don't mean it. They just say it for publication purposes. Daryl Dexter, a local historian who lives in Jonesboro and teaches high school social studies in nearby Tams, said that many of his black students see Anna as a racist place. If people in Anna want their town to shed that reputation, he said, they'll have to reckon with the history of ANNA. What people need to do is say, yes, this happened. We're sorry it happened. It's a part of our heritage, but we're changing that, Dexter said. And until people are willing to at least acknowledge that it's here or that it's there, there's not going to be any change. An Anna resident named Randy Miller, who is white, said that most people in town, including him, don't know any specific incident that led to Anna becoming known as ANNA. But he said it's not something people there are proud of. Our forefathers have gone through and made decisions that weren't the greatest things in the world, Miller said. But at what point do we move on from that? I mean, at what point do we heal instead of coming back and going, let's rip this wound open again? There's got to be a solution, not just a revisiting of the problem. When he said this, he meant that everyone, white people, black people, outsiders such as myself, should focus on how to move forward. But see, here's the thing. They just said that it was an incident that happened in 2013. That's recent. That's not, we're not talking 1913 or 1813. 2013, that's not even 10 years. So the racial element is still there. It's probably just not as flowing as it once was, but it is definitely still present. But see, by them saying, let's just move on, let's not dwell in the past, it's crazy. They like to tell us not to dwell in the past, or even tell themselves not to dwell in the past. But when it comes to a certain group, a certain 3-letter group, their slogan is never forgive, never forget. And they will make sure you never forget it either. Tripp's 18-year-old son, Gavin, graduated from Anna Jonesboro High in the spring. He said people his age in the surrounding counties know about the lore of ANNA and consider Anna to be just a bad place for people that are different. They don't want to come here, Gavin added, so that doesn't allow us to be exposed to different people or different ethnicities. Given this, he's not sure he'll stay in Anna after college. He recalled an incident in 2016 when he was leaving the Farm Fresh milk store after school. Somebody just drove by and yelled out the window, "You're an in-lover," Gavin said. At the time, he was dating a girl who was biracial. He said he hadn't witnessed that kind of public racism in Anna before. I didn't think it would come out of somebody's mouth straight to my face. One afternoon in Anna, during my second visit in May 2018, I approached 2 postal workers, both of them white, loading mail trucks behind the town's post office, and asked them where I could find someone who wasn't white. "You've come to the wrong town," one of them said. For whatever reason, it's just one of those towns, I guess his co-worker added. But there are some black people here, and more, it seems, during the workday. One woman who works in the area and who was black told me she hates it when she's assigned a shift in the town. She fills up her gas tank before going to work so that she spends as little time in Anna as possible. She knows what ANNA stands for, and she doesn't want to take any chances. She asked me not to publish her name out of concern for her safety. Now, this is 2018, 2 years ago. Black people also work at Schultz Developmental Center, a state mental health facility in Anna. Ralph Smith, age 30, has been employed there for 2 years. I met him while he was playing basketball with his young son in the park. People around the area, not just in Anna, have called him derogatory names based on his race, he said. One time it happened while he was pumping gas, but all of that stuff don't get me down. People just don't have enough education or just haven't been around a lot, says Smith, who lives about 30 minutes outside of Anna. When friends of Smith learn he works in Anna, sometimes he gets questions and warnings. They ask him what he's doing out there. Doesn't he know Anna is a sundown town? You'd better be safe, they tell him. Smith just shrugs it off. I think it needs more flavor around here for sure, but everything needs to be more mixed, he said. I think the whole world needs to change, not just Anna, but the entire world. Anna's Walmart draws a more diverse crowd. James Taylor, a 61-year-old man known as Big T in Cairo, where he lives, was shopping there on a Saturday afternoon when I met him. In my younger days, you weren't allowed to up here after dark, period, Taylor said in the parking lot as he loaded grocery bags into his car. He added it was just a racist town. For years, he avoided Anna. He now comes to town to go to Walmart to get his car washed. Taylor said he noticed more black people in Anna in the past 10 years. I take my hat off to that. But he said changing Anna's reputation is going to take a while. Old heads ain't died off yet, he explained. Basically, the ones with the throwback racist ideology are still alive. When Easter Smith opened the door, her house smelled like dinner. Smith, aged 38, moved to Anna in 2016 with her 6 children. Aria, age 19, Atara, age 18, Amaya, age 16, Aroje, age 15, Asaya, age 12, and Asina, age 11. Smith thought hers was the only black family in Anna when she arrived, though she thinks a few more families have moved in since. Smith never thought she would live here. Years before, when she was new to Illinois and living in Murfreesboro, about 25 miles north, she got lost driving somewhere on U.S. Highway 51 after dark and called her husband for directions. She described what she saw and he knew she was in Anna. He said, "Drive fast and keep going," she remembers him saying. But after a series of incidents that made her feel unsafe in Murfreesboro, Smith said she wanted out. Her eldest son, Ariah Hart, had an idea. He had a friend who lived in Anna and had spent weekends there. He'd grown to like it. The high school was good and it had a strong sports program. He felt he and his brothers and sisters would thrive. Yet, when Smith ran the idea by friends and school guidance counselors, just about everyone asked her the same thing. Don't you know what ANNA stands for? The look on their faces was of terror. She prayed, she trusted God, and she trusted her son. She told her husband that Anna was the place they needed to be. He disagreed. He didn't go with her. He declined to be interviewed for this story. I have to do what women and mothers have to do, Smith said, and that's make a better situation for your kids. Before the family moved to Anna, Smith sat her kids down and discussed how to respond if someone called them the N-word, if they were discriminated against at school, or if they didn't feel comfortable. They were not to lash out or fight. In the family's first few months in Anna, Atara and Amaya received some naive questions from their white classmates. Is that your real hair? Can I touch it? How do you run so fast? How do you dance like that? For the most part, it was what they expected, but it hurt. When Atara made the high school basketball team, someone sent her a screenshot of a message telling her teammates to be nice to her because she is black. That made her feel like her blackness was seen as a threat. The sisters have a slew of similar stories, and when they recounted some of those stories to me, they talked over one another and finished one another's sentences. They laughed about how sometimes white people in Anna can be overly nice to them. When I went to church with the family one morning, I watched a white woman touch Atara's hair and tell her she was beautiful like Beyonce. Arya pointed out, since they lived in Anna, his white friends here have taught him how to do things like catch fish, drive ATVs, and shoot guns. We just learn from each other, he said, and that's what I love. Arya said he was called the N-word once during a football game against nearby Duquoin High School. He kept his composure. Sometime later, a few students at Anna Jonesboro High made an Instagram account and anonymously made fun of classmates by posting photos of them along with derogatory captions, Smith said. They posted a photo of him and wrote a caption calling him the N-word and Anna's Jackie Robinson. The school disciplined the students behind the account. Some white parents particularly upset about the post featuring Arya spoke to administrators about it. Smith said that meant a lot to her. In 2018, he won Illinois High School State Wrestling Championship for his weight class as his mother followed the van carrying him and other members of the Anna Jonesboro wrestling team back into town after the finals. People lined up on Main Street to wave and clap and cheer. Some held signs that said, "We love you," read one. "State champ number 1," read another. Smith still tears up thinking about it. This is the kind of thing that makes her wish she had moved to Anna sooner, and it is kind of thing some older white people in Anna thought they'd never see. A young black man welcomed back to town with a public celebration. And they got to be careful with that, because just because they love you now don't mean they're going to love you later. Because you can do one wrong thing and they will flip on you at the drop of a hat. The reason why they're liking him is because he's a sports hero and they love their sports. Smith got Facebook messages from people she'd never met. I don't know you or your son personally, one message read. And I think it has to be said that what your son has done is nothing short of a miracle. What I'm talking about is seeing him bring that community together. Anyone who knows the story or history of Anna Jonesboro would never in a million years imagine something like this would ever happen. Seeing this honestly gives me hope that people can and do change. Nevertheless, 3 years after Smith moved to Anna, her family still has to deal with racist comments. On the first day of Amaya's senior year at Anna Jonesboro High School, students gathered before class outside of the school for impromptu group photos. One boy, Amaya told Smith, yelled to her, "Come on, Blackie," and get in the photo. Amaya looked at him and turned around and walked away. Smith hopes her family is changing Anna's ANNA reputation as well as the minds of some of its residents, even if it's hardly the family's job to do. Growing up near Phoenix, Smith and her family's friends called them the Huxtables, a reference to the upper middle class black family of the Cosby Show. She feels her parents and the high standards they set prepared her well for her current life. If anybody was going to come to Anna, God picked somebody that had the right credentials to be able to come here, she said. Angela Hargrave, a 46-year-old resident of Anna, who was white and a close friend of Smith, said, "Smith's family has set in motion a completely different image for our town and our area. I think it takes a lot of more families like Easter's coming in," Hargrave said. "But I feel like it takes all of us that don't feel that way to step forward and to be brave enough to say, no, that's not what we're about." Still, Smith often thinks twice about simple decisions white people seldom give much thought to. For example, which black friends she can invite to town, because she's not sure they'll all be received well. There are some she decided not to have over. "I'm not that uppity friend that I'm too good for them now, but I'm not introducing them to my friends here. I'm scared that I will be looked at different for entertaining them." These kind of calculations, she said, can be exhausting. Smith told me her family feels pressure to always be on its best behavior. "I mean, that's just how we were taught," she said. "Act like the camera's on, act like someone is following you, act like somebody is watching you, because 9 times out of 10, they are." Like I said, I told you this is a lengthy article that I'm reading right here, but I just had to get all of this out. I think I'm getting towards the end. On a visit to Southern Illinois this spring, I went to the spot in Cairo where William James was lynched 110 years earlier. There, children glided on bicycles from the levee road along the Ohio River down through the intersection where the steel arches stood. Patches of tiled sidewalk that once led into storefronts now faded into dirt. When I called James Taylor, the man I had met at the Anna Walmart months before, he told me there was someone in Cairo I should meet. I hopped into the backseat of Taylor's blue station wagon, and a man named Gregory Walker, age 69, sat in the passenger seat. Walker told me about a sign he said used to be posted near Anna city limits. It said, "No N-words allowed." Walker remembered. "Have you ever seen the population signs?" he asked me. "The green ones with the white letters?" It looked just like that, he added, and it was sitting right next to the population sign. "I've heard about some version of this sign from a few people in Anna, but I've yet to find physical proof of it. A document, a photo, anything. In a way, though, it doesn't matter, because whether or not that sign really existed, it exists in the minds of many black Southern Illinoisans who know what the name of the town stood for." I told Walker about Easter Smith and Area Hart. "Out of 5,000 people up there, you come up with one family," he said, laughing. "That should tell you something right there." As I drove back into Anna later that day, I passed the sign marking its border in population, Anna, and it reads 4,500. And under it is another sign that looks just like it, a green sign with white letters. It was new since the last time I had been in town. "Home of Arya Hart," it reads. 2018 IHSA 1A 152-pound wrestling champion. Whew. Okay, so I finally completed that article. That was a lot to take in about this one town. Now, mind you, this is the first town I'm talking about in Illinois, and I told you at the beginning of the article that it's about 14 or 15 towns. So, yeah, this is going to be a very interesting run for the city, for not the city, for the state of Illinois. But I can't wait to see what y'all say about this down in the comments. I can't wait to see what y'all are going to say in that chat while this video is premiering as well. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments. If y'all from Illinois, tell me if you ever heard of this town before. And everything that I'm reading here pretty much lines up correctly. But y'all let me know what you think. Make sure y'all have your notifications on. Follow me on Twitter if you can. And I will talk to you in the next one. I have to insert this one last thing in here. Some of y'all probably picked up on it as I was reading through the article. But I was reading it and I was trying to get through it because of how lengthy the article was. But to address that mother in that one story, did she actually leave her husband after he told her he would not go with her because of how racist that town was, but decided to pack her stuff up and all her kids and leave him anyway, and to go to a well-known racist and Sundown town? Like, that just like kind of boggled my mind right there. But whatever. I mean, live your life how you want to live it.